Underestimated. The Centaurus Orbital Academy was the pinnacle of galactic military education, a gleaming ring of advanced architecture that circled the neutral planet Lyra 9. Its hallways bustled with the most promising recruits from across the Galactic Alliance's 273-member species. The air cycled through 17 different atmospheric compositions every standard minute to accommodate the diverse biological needs of its students. Gravity plates adjusted with microscopic precision beneath the feet, tentacles or hover discs of passing cadets. And Mira Chen was late to orientation. Her boots echoed against the polished floor as she sprinted down corridor E7, her modest duffel bag bouncing against her back. The artificial gravity was set to 1.3 times Earth standard, an intentional oversight that the administration never seemed interested in correcting for the handful of human cadets admitted each cycle. "Cutting it close, aren't you, Terran?" A voice like cracking ice called out as Mira rounded the corner. The speaker was a Vexian, 6.5 feet of crystalline exoskeleton that glittered under the Academy's lights. His faceted eyes regarded her with what passed for amusement among his kind. "Thanks for the update, Terex," Mira managed between controlled breaths. She wasn't winded, not even close, but there was no reason to reveal that to the Vexian upperclassmen. "Commander Azarov started orientation 2 minutes ago. Late attendance is an immediate demerit." Terex's crystalline mouthparts shifted into what might have been a smile, though perhaps they'll make an exception for the diversity quota. Mira bit back a retort. There would be time enough to prove herself. Instead, she nodded and continued toward the amphitheater, slipping inside through the rear entrance and finding an empty seat in the section marked with the red triangle that designated high-gravity species. The section was nearly empty. 3 burly Korgan warriors with their characteristic armored plates and 4 stockeyed Vergar miners were the only other occupants. No surprise, Deathworlders were rare among the Academy's populations, not for lack of capability, but because the Galactic Alliance Council had made the admissions criteria nearly impossible for species from planets with gravity above 1.2 G and atmospheres containing more than 19% oxygen. Expectations for conduct befitting the elite of the Alliance forces, Commander Azarov was saying. The Elysian officer's translucent tentacles rippled as he spoke, the universal translator converting his subsonic vibrations to standard speech. "Your training will push the biological and psychological limits of your species. Many of you will fail. Some will excel. All will serve." His primary eye cluster swept across the assembled recruits, pausing noticeably when it reached the Deathworlder section. "Some of you have been admitted under special consideration programs. Do not expect accommodations beyond the minimum necessary for your survival." A ripple of amusement passed through the amphitheater. Mira kept her face neutral, but she caught the sympathetic glance from one of the Vergar. "Your dormitory assignments and first cycle schedules have been transmitted to your personal devices. First meal begins at 600 hours, and physical assessment commences at 800. Dismissed." The assembly rose in a cacophony of movement. The rustle of exoskeletons, the glide of hover fields, the slither of scaled bodies, and the plodding steps of the few bictal species. Mira checked her wrist terminal and found her room assignment. Level 8, Section D, Room 47. Deathworlder housing, naturally. Far from the academic centers and closer to the reinforced structural areas of the station. "Chen. Hey, Chen." Mira turned to see one of the Dvergar pushing through the crowd toward her. He was about 5 feet tall with dense musculature and a thick beard braided with metal clips that marked his clan affiliation. "Thorgan Ironfoot," he said, extending a 4-fingered hand. "Heard there was a human in this cycle's intake. Wanted to introduce myself before the upperclassmen fill your head with their prejudice." Mira shook his hand, careful not to grip too firmly. Dvergar were strong by galactic standards, but humans still had about a 30% advantage in raw strength. "Mira Chen, good to meet you, Thorgan." "Same dormitory level," he said, glancing at her terminal. "Us gravity, well, natives have to stick together." The thin atmospheres don't understand what it means to carry real weight. They walk together toward the lifts, ignoring the stares and whispers from the other species. For many of the cadets, this was their first time seeing humans or Dvergar up close, rather than in educational holos. Is it true what they say? Thorgan asked as they entered the lift. About Earth. Mira raised an eyebrow. Depends what they're saying. That you Terrans domesticated predators as companions. That your children intentionally slide down snow-covered mountains for entertainment. That you drink fermented poison for pleasure. Mira laughed. Dogs, skiing, and alcohol. Yeah, that's all true. Thorgan shook his head in amazement. No wonder they call it a Deathworld. My ancestors were terraforming colonists on Vergheim 3,000 years ago. We've adapted to 1.4G, but we engineered away most of the environmental hazards. You Terrans just live with them. The lift stopped at level 8, and they stepped out into a corridor with reinforced flooring and higher ceilings than the upper levels, designed for species that tended to be heavier and stronger than the galactic average. This is me, Mira said as they reached room 47. See you at physical assessment tomorrow. Thorgan grinned, his teeth gleaming with metallic dental implants that were ceremonial among his people. Looking forward to it. Most of these void dancers have never seen what actual muscle can do. After he left, Mira entered her room, utilitarian and sparse, with a bed built to withstand 10 times standard gravity and environmental controls that could replicate Earth's atmosphere. A small mercy in a place that seemed designed to remind humans of their outsider status. She unpacked quickly, then accessed the Academy's information system. Besides Thorgan and the 3 Korgans, there were only 2 other Deathworlders in this intake cycle, a Vanaran from the jungle world Sylvanus Aya, and another human named Kento Nakamura. Out of 1,200 new recruits, only 7 Deathworlders. The odds were exactly as she'd expected. Her terminal chimed with a message from her assigned academic advisor, requesting an immediate meeting. Unusual on intake day, but Mira had learned to expect the unusual when it came to how the Alliance treated humans. 20 minutes later, she sat across from Professor Zillith, a Medusan whose serpentine head tentacles writhed slowly as she examined Mira's file on a holographic display. Cadet Chen, the professor said, her voice a melodic hum through the translator. Your test scores are anomalous. In what way, Professor? You scored in the 98th percentile on the tactical simulation, 96th in theoretical astrogation, and 99th in xenolinguistic aptitude. The professor's head tentacles coiled tighter. Yet your physical parameters are merely average for your species. Mira kept her expression neutral. I focused on academic preparation, Mom. Indeed. The professor's compound eyes gleamed. The Academy has a history with human cadets, Cadet Chen. They typically excel in physical assessments due to their Deathworld adaptations, but struggle with the intellectual rigors of our curriculum. I'm aware of the stereotype, Professor. It is not a stereotype. It is statistical reality. Professor Zillith's tentacles rippled with what might have been irritation, which makes your profile unusual. I must ask, did you have assistance with your entrance examinations? The implied accusation hung in the air. Mira straightened her spine, keeping her voice level despite the anger building behind her ribs. No, Professor. I did not cheat, if that's what you're suggesting. I am merely exploring possibilities, Cadet. The alternative explanation is that you are an exceptional outlier among your species, which seems improbable. Perhaps your statistics need updating, ma'am. For a moment, the Medusan was silent, her tentacles completely still, a sign of intense focus among her kind. We shall see, Cadet Chen. The physical assessment tomorrow will provide additional data points. The Academy's gauntlet trial at the end of the first quarter will be especially illuminating. No human has ever completed it with a passing score. There's always a first time, Professor. The Medusan's head tentacles twisted in what might have been amusement. Indeed, your confidence is noted, if misplaced. "You are dismissed, cadet." As Mira left the administrative section, she passed a group of Elysian cadets, willowy beings with bioluminescent patterns rippling across their translucent skin. They fell silent as she approached, their light patterns shifting to a frequency that the human eye couldn't fully perceive, but that Mira knew indicated discomfort or disdain. One of them, taller than the others with elaborate patterns that suggested higher social status, stepped deliberately into her path. "Excuse me," Mira said, moving to step around him. "The Deathworlder speaks," the Elysian said, his voice like wind through crystal. "Tell me, creature, what is it like to evolve on a planet that tried to kill your kind at every opportunity?" "Effective," Mira replied simply. The Elysian's companions trilled with laughter, their light patterns pulsing in synchronized mockery. "The physical assessment tomorrow will be conducted at standard galactic gravity and atmosphere," the Leave Elysian said. "Without your Deathworld advantages, we shall see what you're truly capable of." Mira smiled thinly. "I look forward to the demonstration." The physical assessment arena was a vast circular chamber with adaptive terrain and gravity controls. Hovering observation platforms circled above, filled with instructors and senior cadets watching the new recruits. The first years were divided into assessment groups of 20, with Mira, Thorjan, and one of the Korgan warriors, a female named Grax, representing the Deathworlders in their group. "Stand by for calibration," announced the chief instructor, a Nexian whose gelatinous body was contained within an exosuit of gleaming metal. "Assessment will take place at 1.0 standard gravity, 0.9 standard atmospheric pressure, and 18% oxygen content." Mira exchanged glances with Thorjan. The settings were deliberately chosen to disadvantage Deathworlders. Lower gravity that would make their muscle memory unreliable, thinner air with less oxygen than they were accustomed to. "First trial, endurance circuit," the instructor continued. "Complete as many laps as possible within the 15-minute time allocation." The circuit materialized, an obstacle course with climbing walls, balance beams over simulated acid pits, crawl spaces, and hurdles. As the signal to begin sounded, the cadets surged forward. Mira paced herself, watching how the others tackled the obstacles. The Elysian from yesterday, she'd learned his name was Theron, moved with liquid grace, his longer limbs and lighter body mass giving him an advantage on the balance sections. The insectoid Vriscan cadets skittered up the climbing walls with ease, their multiple limbs finding purchase where others struggled. But as the minutes ticked by, Mira noticed something interesting. The thinner atmosphere was affecting them all. Even the species adapted to lower oxygen environments were struggling to maintain their initial pace. The lighter gravity made some obstacles easier but disrupted fine motor control for many. By the 10-minute mark, most of the non-Deathworlders had slowed significantly. Theron was still moving well, but his bioluminescence had dimmed, conserving energy. Only Thorgan, Grax, and Mira maintained a steady pace. When the final signal sounded, Mira had completed 22 circuits, 4 more than Theron, 3 more than the best Vriscan, and tied with Thorjan. Grax had managed 20, impressive given the Korgan's heavier build. "Unexpected," murmured the Nexian instructor, their voice betraying genuine surprise. "Proceed to the strength assessment." Here, despite the lighter gravity, the Deathworlders dominated completely, even with the environmental handicaps. Mira pressed, lifted and pulled weights that caused the observers' data tablets to chime with alert notifications. "Is the equipment calibrated correctly?" demanded one of the senior instructors, a Thulian with feathered crests that stood erect in agitation. "Triple-checked, Commander," replied a technician. "The human female is pressing 2.7 times her body weight." Mira pretended not to hear, but she caught Thorgan's approving nod and Grax's respectful eye blink, the Korgan equivalent of a thumbs up. The final assessment was cognitive response under physical stress, solving complex three-dimensional puzzles while maintaining an elevated heart rate on a running track. Here, Mira excelled beyond even her fellow Deathworlders, completing patterns that many of the academically gifted species struggled with. As the assessments concluded, Mira found herself standing beside Theron as they waited for their results to process. "Impressive performance," the Elysian said, his tone carefully neutral. "For a Deathworlder." "Thank you," Mira replied evenly. "You did well on the balance sections." "Natural Elysian grace," he said, his bioluminescence pulsing with pride. "Though I admit, your cognitive responses were unexpected. Humans are full of surprises." Indeed. Theron's light patterns shifted to a more serious configuration. The Gauntlet trial will be different, however. It tests more than physical capability or intelligence. No Deathworlder has ever completed it. "So I've heard. The failure rate is 82% among all species. Among Deathworlders, it is 100%. Mira met his gaze steadily. "Statistics change. We shall see, human. We shall see." Revelation. The first quarter at Centaurus Orbital Academy passed in a blur of classes, training, and the subtle warfare of interspecies politics. Mira excelled in her coursework, particularly in tactical simulations where her unorthodox approaches consistently achieved objectives that the standard algorithms deemed impossible. "It's because humans evolved as persistence predators," she explained to Thorgan one evening as they studied in the Deathworlder common area. "We don't just solve problems, we hunt them down." Dvergar were miners and crafters, Thorgan replied, his fingers tracing complex equations in the holographic display. "We see patterns in stone and metal that others miss, but your human adaptability." He shook his head in admiration. "No wonder the Council tries to limit your numbers in the Academy." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Kento Nakamura, the other human cadet. Unlike Mira's lithe build, Kento was stocky and powerful, with the dense musculature of someone raised in Mars's 0.38 G environment, who had trained relentlessly to compensate. "Have you heard?" he asked without preamble. "They've moved up the Gauntlet trial. It's happening next week." Mira frowned. "That's 2 weeks earlier than scheduled." Apparently, several Council observers are visiting the Academy. The administration wants to showcase the rigorous standards of the program. Kento's expression was grim. "Word is they specifically requested to see Deathworlders attempt the trial." Entertainment. Grax growled from her corner seat, where she had been silently maintaining her ceremonial blade. "They wish to watch us fail for their amusement." Thorgan snorted, the sound like gravel shifting. "Let them watch then. We'll give them a show they won't forget." But despite his bravado, a heavy silence fell over the room. The Gauntlet trial was legendary, a multi-phase challenge that tested physical endurance, tactical decision-making, and psychological resilience simultaneously. Its exact parameters changed each year, but its reputation for breaking even the most promising cadets remained constant. "We should train together," Mira suggested. "Pool what we know about previous trials." "Agreed," said Kento. "I've collected data on the last 5 years. The parameters change, but there are patterns." They spent the next week preparing intensively, analyzing past trials and conditioning their bodies for every possible scenario. Meanwhile, the atmosphere in the Academy shifted as news of the accelerated Gauntlet trial spread. Mira noticed increased scrutiny from instructors and curious stares from other cadets. The evening before the trial, Professor Zillith summoned Mira to her office. "Cadet Chen," the Medusan said, her head tentacles moving in slow, deliberate patterns. "Your performance this quarter has been noteworthy." "Thank you, Professor." It was not necessarily a compliment. The professor's compound eyes gleamed. "Your tactical simulation scores are particularly interesting. You consistently achieve objectives through methods that our algorithms classify as extremely low probability of success. I prefer to think of them as unconventional approaches, ma'am." "Indeed." The Medusan studied her for a long moment. "The Gauntlet trial tomorrow will test more than your physical capabilities, cadet. It will test your decision-making under extreme stress. The failure rate among humans is total. I would advise you to prepare yourself for disappointment. Mira met the professor's gaze steadily. With respect, Professor, I don't believe in no-win scenarios. For the first time, she saw the Medusan's tentacles display a pattern she couldn't interpret, something between surprise and what might have been concern. An interesting perspective, Cadet. We shall see if it serves you tomorrow. The Gauntlet trial arena dominated the center of the Academy's training level, a massive circular chamber with 50-meter ceilings and adaptive terrain systems capable of reconfiguring into virtually any environment. Today, its usual spectator areas were supplemented by a special observation platform where 7 dignified figures sat, the visiting council representatives. The first-year cadets were gathered in the preparation area, divided into groups of 5 that would tackle the trial in sequence. Through some administrative coincidence, all 7 Deathworlders had been placed in the same group, the last to attempt the challenge. They want us to see everyone else's attempts, murmured Kento. Psychological warfare. Or they want the council representatives to see all the Deathworlders fail in one convenient viewing, Thorkin added grimly. The first group entered the arena as the announcement system explained the parameters of this year's Gauntlet. 3 phases: survival, combat, and extraction. Cadets must navigate a hostile environment, neutralize opposition forces, and reach the extraction point within the 45-minute time allocation. Failure in any phase constitutes failure of the entire trial. The viewing screens showed the arena transforming into a volcanic landscape with narrow paths over simulated magma flows. Environmental hazards included toxic gas vents, unstable terrain, and periodic tremors that collapse sections of the path. One by one, the groups entered and attempted the Gauntlet. Some performed admirably, completing 2 phases before failing in the third. Others barely survived the initial environmental challenges. By the time the 6th group finished, with only 2 of its 5 members completing the full trial, the council representatives were showing signs of boredom. Then it was the Deathworlders' turn. As they entered the preparation chamber, Mira noticed that the arena was being reconfigured to a different environment than what the previous groups had faced. They're changing it. Grax snarled, her armored plates shifting with agitation. Of course they are, said the Vanaran. Silva, her prehensile tail twitching with nervous energy. Can't have Deathworlders facing the same challenge as normal species. The announcement system chimed. Final group parameters adjusted for species-specific capabilities. Environmental gravity increased to 1.5 standard. Atmospheric pressure reduced to 0.8 standard. Oxygen content at 16%. Thorgan swore in his native tongue. They're not even pretending to be fair. Mira closed her eyes briefly, centering herself. We knew this would happen. Stick to the plan. The preparation chamber door slid open, revealing their challenge. A dense jungle environment with towering trees, tangled undergrowth, and swampy terrain. The increased gravity was immediately noticeable, making each movement require more effort than normal. Survival phase commences now, announced the system. Reach the central clearing within 15 minutes while maintaining life signs above critical levels. They moved forward as a unit, with Silva taking point, her Vanaran adaptations making her the most comfortable in the arboreal setting despite the increased gravity. She swung from branch to branch, identifying the most efficient path forward. 5 minutes in, they encountered the first serious obstacle, a wide ravine with a rushing river below. The obvious crossing point, a fallen tree, was clearly booby-trapped. Analysis? Mira asked, conserving breath in the oxygen-thin air. Kento surveyed the scene. Trees rigged to collapse. Rivers too fast for safe crossing. Jumping distance exceeds safety margins in this gravity. Alternative, prompted Grax. Mira studied the canopy above. Silva, can you establish a high crossing using those vines? The Vanaran was already moving, her agile form leaping to the higher branches and testing the strength of the thick vines that hung between the trees. Within minutes, she had created a precarious but viable crossing point 20 meters above the ravine. One by one, they crossed. Silva first, then the lighter Dverger, followed by the humans. Grax and the other Korgan. Drak crossed last, their heavier bodies making the vine bridge sway dangerously. They reached the central clearing with 2 minutes to spare, their vital signs registering in the cautionary range, but well above critical, a testament to their Deathworld physiologies. Survival phase complete, announced the system. Combat phase initiating. The clearing transformed, holographic enemies materializing around them. Combat drones using minimal physical forms enhanced by convincing projections. The drones were programmed with advanced tactical AI and equipped with stun weapons that simulated battlefield injuries. Formation Delta, Mira called, and the Deathworlders moved with practiced precision into a defensive circle. The combat was intense, the drones specifically targeting vulnerabilities in each species' physiology. They focused fire on Silva's more delicate frame, tried to flank the Korgan's limited peripheral vision, and sent infiltration units against the Dvergar and humans. But what the combat algorithms failed to account for was the improvisational nature of Deathworlder combat. Where other species followed established doctrines and predictable patterns, the Deathworlders switched tactics seemingly at random, confounding the AI's predictive capabilities. Mira ducked under a drone's attack, rolled in the increased gravity that should have made such a maneuver impossible, and came up behind the unit. A precision strike to its control node disabled it instantly. Extraction point identified, called Kento, who had hacked into a disabled drone's navigation system. Southeast corner, 300 meters. They fought their way forward, the combination of combat stress and environmental conditions pushing even their enhanced physiologies to their limits. Silva took a glancing hit that temporarily paralyzed her left arm. Thorgin was limping from a direct strike to his knee. As they approached the extraction point, a simulated dropship landing zone, the final challenge revealed itself. A narrow bridge over a chasm, heavily defended by entrenched enemy positions. 10 minutes remaining in trial allocation, announced the system. Mira assessed the situation rapidly. Standard approach won't work. Too many crossfire zones. Frontal assault would deplete our numbers, agreed Grax. We need a diversion, said Kento. Mira's eyes fixed on the structural supports of the bridge itself. Not a diversion. A completely different approach. She outlined her plan quickly, and despite its audacity, the others nodded in agreement. While Silva and the Korgans created a distraction at the front of the bridge, Mira, Kento, and Thorgin worked their way underneath it. Using their superior strength, even hampered by the increased gravity, they systematically damaged the support structures in a precise pattern. When Mira gave the signal, they'd rejoined the others and charged the bridge together. Their combined weight and momentum, strategically applied to the weakened sections, caused a cascading structural failure, not enough to collapse the entire bridge, but sufficient to create a gap in the enemy's defensive line. They surged through the opening, Grax and Drak physically shielding the smaller team members with their armored bodies. They reached the extraction point with less than a minute to spare, all 7 Deathworlders alive and functional, if exhausted. Extraction phase complete, announced the system, a note of what might have been surprise in its synthesized voice. Gauntlet trial completed successfully. All team members extracted. A stunned silence fell over the arena. In the observation areas, instructors stared at their data tablets in disbelief. On the council platform, the representatives leaned forward with sudden interest. Impossible, Mira heard someone mutter. They changed the parameters specifically to ensure. Cadet Chen called the chief instructor, his voice echoing through the arena. Explain your tactical approach to the final phase. Mira stepped forward, standing straight despite her exhaustion. Sir, we identified that the bridge was the only viable approach to the extraction point by design. Rather than engage the superior defensive position directly, we modified the environment to create a new tactical scenario more favorable to our capabilities. You damaged Academy property, objected one of the instructors. With respect, sir, The simulation was designed to test our ability to complete the mission objectives. The rules specified neutralizing opposition and reaching the extraction point. They did not specify how. Professor Zillith's voice came next, her tone unreadable. You deliberately created a scenario outside the parameters of the standard evaluation metrics. The parameters were already altered specifically for our group, Professor, Mira replied evenly. We adapted accordingly. A murmur ran through the observation areas. On the council platform, one of the representatives, a Solarian whose luminous form shimmered with interest, stood and approached the chief instructor. They conferred briefly before the instructor turned back to the arena. Cadets, you are dismissed to medical evaluation. Cadet Chen, you will report to Conference Room Alpha immediately following your assessment. 2 hours later, after being cleared by medical, Mira found herself in a formal conference room facing the 7 council representatives and the Academy's senior leadership. Cadet Chen, began the Solarian representative, his voice a harmonic cascade of tones. Your performance today was illuminating. Thank you, Representative, Mira replied cautiously. Do you know why the Galactic Alliance limits the number of Deathworlder cadets admitted to the Academy? Mira chose her words carefully. Official policy cites resource allocation and specialized accommodation requirements. Sir. Indeed, those are the official reasons. The Solarian's luminous form pulsed thoughtfully. The unofficial reason is fear, Cadet Chen. Fear of what species like yours might become if given unfettered access to the Alliance's resources and knowledge. Murmurs of disagreement came from several of the Academy officials, but the Solarian continued. Your tactical approach today demonstrated precisely what concerns the Council. You did not merely complete the trial. You rejected its fundamental assumptions and created your own solution. This is not how the Alliance military traditionally operates. Mira remained silent, sensing that a response wasn't yet expected. However, the Solarian continued, recent developments have forced us to reconsider our position. The Void Collective's incursion into the Arcturus sector 3 months ago revealed critical weaknesses in our conventional tactical doctrine. This was news to Mira. The Void Collective, a mysterious faction from beyond Alliance space, had been little more than rumors and unconfirmed reports during her time on Earth. Their technology and tactics do not conform to established patterns, said another representative, a Thulian whose feathered crest marked him as a high-ranking military official. Our standard responses proved inadequate. We need unconventional thinking, added a third representative. Adaptability, resilience, qualities that Deathworld species have in abundance. The Solarian's form brightened. Cadet Chen, the Council is initiating a new program, a special tactical unit comprised exclusively of Deathworld species, trained specifically to counter emerging threats that do not respond to conventional approaches. We would like you to be its first commander. Mira blinked in surprise. Sir, I'm only a first-year cadet. Your academic records, combined with today's performance, suggest you have capabilities far beyond your current rank, said the Solarian. More importantly, you have demonstrated the exact mindset we require, the ability to see beyond established parameters and create new solutions where none seem to exist. What would this entail, exactly? Advanced training, access to classified intelligence, operational authority that would typically require years to attain. The Solarian's form pulsed with what might have been excitement, and the opportunity to reshape how the Alliance approaches unconventional threats. Mira thought of her fellow Deathworlders, Thorgan, Grax, Silva, Kento, and the others. She thought of Earth, still struggling for full recognition within the Alliance, despite centuries of contribution. Would I select my own team? She asked. Within certain parameters, yes. And would our successes be acknowledged as such? No more hidden quotas or rigged trials. The Solarian's form dimmed slightly, the equivalent of a human's uncomfortable shift. Transparency would be necessary for the program's success. Mira straightened her shoulders. Decision made. Then I accept, Representative. Excellent. The Solarian turned to the Academy officials. Effective immediately, Cadet Chen is promoted to Provisional Lieutenant. The Deathworlder Special Tactics Program will begin tomorrow. As Mira left the conference room, she found Theron waiting in the corridor, his bioluminescent patterns conveying complex emotions that the translator couldn't fully capture. Lieutenant Chen, he said, using her new rank without hesitation. That was impressive. Thank you, Cadet Theron. The way you approached the bridge problem. It never occurred to any of us that the environment itself could be manipulated. His patterns shifted to what she recognized as sincere curiosity. Is that how humans always think? Mira smiled slightly. We don't accept no-win scenarios. Theron's lights pulsed in what might have been amusement. The Void Collective incursion has the entire Alliance concerned. There are rumors they have technology that can neutralize our standard defenses completely. Then we'll need to develop non-standard defenses. Perhaps, Theron said, his patterns shifting to a more formal configuration. There might be value in collaboration between our approaches. The Elysian tactical tradition emphasizes harmony and integration rather than direct confrontation. Complementary methodologies, Mira agreed, seeing where he was headed. If your new program has room for non-Deathworlder perspectives, as advisors, perhaps I would be interested in applying. Mira studied him thoughtfully. 6 weeks ago, he had dismissed her as a curiosity at best, a primitive at worst. Now he was volunteering to serve under her command. The galaxy was changing faster than anyone had anticipated. I'll keep that in mind, Cadet Theron. As she walked toward the Deathworlder dormitory to share the news with her companions, Mira felt the weight of her new responsibility settling on her shoulders. The Alliance was finally acknowledging what Deathworlders had known all along, that the harshest cradles produced the most adaptive children. And in a galaxy facing unknown threats from beyond its borders, adaptability might be the difference between survival and extinction. The Void Collective was coming, but they were about to discover that humanity. And their Deathworlder allies didn't believe in no-win scenarios.